It's Tuesday, January 13th, 2026. The Libtard protests continue. I think Trump is concerned about the future of his tariffs and a truth nuclear bomb. Next on the AM Update. The Libtard anti-ICE protests continue around the country, most notably in Minnesota. At the White House, Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt says they're very misguided.
President Trump and I actually spoke about this last night and how Secretary Noem is doing a phenomenal job, not just securing the border, which she and the president did together in record time, but also in defense of the brave men and women of ICE who put on a law enforcement uniform every single day to protect our communities and to protect all of you. And every American, regardless if they are Democrat or Republican, ICE is doing a very important job to remove illegal alien criminals from our communities. And I think it's very striking that all weekend long, you had agitators and violent American citizens out in the streets of Minneapolis protesting. Protesting what exactly? Apparently, they are protesting the removal of heinous murderers and rapists and criminals from a city that I can guarantee you, when you look at the list of the illegal criminals that ICE is removing from our communities every day, not a single person in those protests and not a single person standing here that works in the mainstream media in Washington, D.C. would want those individuals in your neighborhood, in your community, around your children and around your families. ICE is doing an incredibly important job that's not just important to our homeland security, but our national security. And this administration will continue to stand wholeheartedly by the brave men and women of ICE, including that officer in Minneapolis who was absolutely justified in using self-defense against a lunatic who was part of a group, an organized group, to interject and to impede on law enforcement operations. And it's disgusting what we have seen from the left. And I think that it just shows you where the modern day Democrat Party stands today in protecting illegal alien pedophiles and rapists and murderers over law-abiding American citizens and our brave men and women who serve in law enforcement.
White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt, that is some 100% 200 proof straight spitting of facts. Couldn't have said it any better myself. In about 2 minutes, she completely disembowels all of the left-wing narratives about what happened in Minnesota last week with Renee Good and her killing because she was trying to screw around and find out, and unfortunately, she found out. Also at the White House, President Trump posted on Truth Social, quote, the actual numbers that we would have to pay back for any reason if the Supreme Court were to rule against the United States of America on tariffs would be many hundreds of billions of dollars, and that doesn't include the amount of payback that countries and companies would require for the investments they are making on building plants, factories, and equipment for the purpose of being able to avoid the payment of tariffs. When these investments are added, we're talking about trillions of dollars. It would be a complete mess and almost impossible for our country to pay. Anybody who says that it can be quickly and easily done would be making a false, inaccurate, and totally misunderstood answer to this very large and complex question. If the Supreme Court rules against the United States of America on this national security bonanza, we're screwed. That's a message from President Trump. It sounds like he may be concerned the Supreme Court may not rule in his favor on the issue of tariffs. Back to Minnesota we go. Minnesota Republican State Representative confirmed to Blaze News, the story is from Blaze, that articles of impeachment are being drawn up for Governor Tim Walz and will be released soon. The Democratic vice presidential candidate, failed one, has been assailed for months over accusations he obstructed law enforcement efforts to stop that massive Somali fraud scandal. It could have cost the government billions of dollars. State Representative Ben Davis, who is also a pastor, said, quote, we are going public with them, those articles of impeachment, I believe this week, possibly even today. Davis said that Republicans have been telling Walz directly to intervene against the fraud and that he's refused. Walz previously announced he would not be seeking a third term in office and cited the fraud accusations while continuing to deny involvement. He, of course, said that any moment that he spends defending himself politically is a moment he can't campaign, blah, yada, yada, yada. Now, this, of course, is doomed to fail, but any functioning party, even a state like Minnesota, any functioning political party, in this case the Republican Party, should at least manage to draw articles of impeachment on a guy like Tim Walz for a myriad reasons. But the latest, of course, the Somali fraud scandal, that one is well deserved. Back in Washington, Democrat Senator Mark Kelly of Arizona says he filed a lawsuit against Department of War Secretary Pete Hegseth. Hegseth has accused Kelly of committing sedition by suggesting that members of the U.S. military should refuse to comply with orders from the administration. Kelly has said he intended only for members to refuse unlawful orders. Of course, wonderful little terms of art there. Only unlawful orders. And he also said anybody, any reasonable person, I think it was Mark Kelly who said this, maybe it was one of those other senators, any reasonable person can figure out what unlawful is. That's a recipe for the disaster. Hegseth had ordered Kelly's military retirement pay to be cut and censured the senator, who is a retired U.S. Navy officer. Kelly said in a statement on social media, Pete Hegseth is coming after what I earned through my 25 years of military service in violation of my rights as an American, as a retired veteran, and as a United States senator whose job is to hold him and this or any administration accountable. His unconstitutional crusade against me sends a chilling message to every retired member of the military. If you speak out and say something that President or Secretary of Defense doesn't like, you'll be censured, threatened with demotion, or even prosecuted. Wah, 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 wah. That's basically Mark Kelly's message right there. I'm just going to cry publicly, the Arizona senator says. Let's do some tracking polls, some data, shall we? Whole bevy of these dropped yesterday. Here are a few that caught my eye. According to Gallup, one of the most reliable kind of snapshot pollsters and tracking pollsters of my life, shows that 35% of Americans now identify as conservative, 33% identify as moderate, 28% identify as liberal. The 35 who identify as Republican down a couple of points in a couple of years. Meanwhile, the 33% who identify as moderate also down, and 28% identifying as liberal, that's up. It's up about 8 percentage points since the year 2000. Isn't that something? There's also this. The percentage of Americans, this is a civics poll, by the way. The percentage of Americans who want to, quote unquote, abolish ICE is at a new all-time high. 42% of Americans say they want to, quote unquote, abolish immigration and customs enforcement. 42%, 50% oppose. That is also incredible. 42% of this country say that they want anybody and everybody to come into this country unvetted. That's what immigration and customs enforcement is supposed to do. And they do removals as well. But that's just the newest buzzword, abolish ICE. Defund the police, abolish, it's all the same. Real Clear polling finds the average of both parties' approval ratings. Here's the Republican Party's favorability rating, 38.2% favorability rating. Unfavorable, 52.5%. That's really bad. And then there's the Democrats. 32.5% favorability rating, 56.2% unfavorable. Even markedly worse than Republicans. And, to add insult to injury, they might do really well in the midterms. Because of people like this, just completely soulless, shameless individuals like Jasmine Crockett, Congresswoman from Texas.
Now, some people get a little funny when you start talking about race, but this is real. There was a Trump-appointed justice. I testified because I had already sued the state of Texas because Texas is racist.
Yeah.
The Congresswoman from Texas just overtly says, quote, Texas is racist. It's a bold strategy, Cotton. We'll see how that turns out for you. How are we doing over at the FBI? How is the cleaning going over there? How's the mess being tidied up? We'll have an update on that. Also, Zoomers go to college and a truth nuclear bomb. That's coming up next. According to Tom Fitton at Judicial Watch, FBI leadership fired around 138 employees or other separations since January 30 or 20th of 2025. That would be last year. That's according to Office of Personnel Management data. 3,063 FBI employees left FBI employment since President Trump came back into office. Most either retired, 872, or quit, 980. 3,000, over 3,000 employees have been fired or quit or retired at the FBI since Trump took over. That's good news, right? The FBI employs 35.3 thousand people. Not going well, Kash Patel. Not going well. That's 0.4% of FBI employees. This is not exactly the Silkwood shower, and I would even argue at this point the disintegration the FBI so badly needs. Just 0.4% of FBI employees have left since Trump took over. That is directly laid at the feet of Kash Patel and Pam Bondi. They are not doing their jobs. And part of me is wondering if that was the point the whole time. Check out this story from Fortune magazine. As Gen Z ditch books at record levels, students are arriving to classrooms unable to complete assigned reading on par with previous expectations. It's leaving colleges no choice but to lower their expectations. One shocked professor has described young adults showing up to class unable to read a single sentence. Jessica Hooton-Wilson, a professor of great books and humanities at Pepperdine University, told Fortune, quote, "It's not even an inability to critically think, it's an inability to read sentences." Her observation reflects a broader trend. Nearly half of all Americans did not read a single book in 2025, with the habit plunging some 40% over the past decade. And even with young people embracing Book Talk, a TikTok subcommunity dedicated to books and literature, Gen Z's reading habits still lag behind all other generations. Americans aged 18 to 29 read on average just 5.8 books in 2025, according to YouGov. Wilson, that professor, quote, "I feel like I'm tap dancing and having to read things aloud because there's no way that anyone read it the night before. Even when you read it in class with them, there's still so much they can't process about the very words that are on the page." Are we cooked? I tell you what's getting cooked are the brains, the dope-addled brains of those who are hooked up nonstop to smartphones. That is what's cooked. RFK Jr. went on Real Time with Bill Maher recently to discuss the Pfizer COVID jab. Check out this exchange.
There's 25% of Americans who believe that they know somebody who was killed by a COVID vaccine.
Killed?
Killed. 25% of Americans, 52% of Americans believe that the vaccines are causing injuries, including death. 52%. Oh, if you look at the clinical trial studies, the actual studies that were done, that were released, of the Pfizer vaccine, Moderna has not released it. If you look at the Pfizer vaccine, there were 22,000 people in the placebo group, 22,000 people who got the actual vaccine. And the people who got the vaccine had a 23% higher death rate from all causes at the end of that study.
But that could not be the disease itself?
No, well,
because we know that
if it is, then the vaccine doesn't work, does it?
Well, it's certainly. Well, no, that's not. That's.
Oh, Nelly, that was wonderfully done by RFK Jr., HHS Secretary. You can't have it both ways. You people who just can't get jabbed enough. You can't have it both ways. Bill Maher wants to say, well, it could be the disease itself that's killing people and not the jab. And then RFK, well, then doesn't that mean that the jab is ineffective? Doesn't work for its stated purpose? And you heard Bill Maher, whoa here. Whoa. Let's go to this. A truth nuclear bomb. Never heard of this gentleman before. He goes by Shabbos Kestenbaum. He was involved in a debate, I think rather recently, regarding the American relationship with the country of Israel. Here is his closing argument. It's 5 minutes long, and I usually don't like to play clips quite that long, but I think he acquits the pro-Israeli position, or at least the anti-retardation position. I think he acquits that very, very well. This is, again, somebody named Shabbos, apologies for the pronunciation, Kestenbaum, at a debate recently. His closing argument, why it's pretty retarded to focus so much time and energy and vitriol towards one singular country.
Again, I find it very bizarre that in a topic that did not include the word Israel, the only country we actually discussed was Israel. I actually believe that we should end all foreign aid, but that includes all foreign aid, not only one obsessive country. You mentioned FARA. Let's talk about FARA, the Foreign Agents Registry Act. The Foreign Agent Registry Act is a law imposed by the United States in order to block the access of Nazi Germans to the United States. Qatar currently has 31 registered FARA agents compared to Israel, which has 15. From 2021 to 2025 alone, Qatari FARA agents logged 627 in-person meetings with members of Congress, which is more than every other country by 300 meetings. So let's talk about AIPAC. I don't support AIPAC, largely because they're pretty ineffective. AIPAC is an organization comprised exclusively of Americans, by Americans, and for Americans. You don't have to like them, but that doesn't mean they're an agent of a foreign country. Just like Indian Americans have UNISPAC, the Armenian Americans have ENCA, Greek Americans have HALC, or the Ukrainian American community, which is the UCCA. Americans are free to lobby as they would like. And if you want to make laws against the lobbying of Americans to their government, then fine, let's discuss the policy and legislation, although unfortunately all we've done is obsess over one country. In 2024, it's true, AIPAC is an American lobbying group, just like the NRA or the Chamber of Commerce. They spent roughly $100 million on lobbying and elections. In the same year, China spent $500 million. Japan spent $400 million. Big Pharma, $400 million. Saudi Arabia, $310 million. Qatar, $250 million. But you wouldn't know this because my esteemed opponent is obsessed with only one country and one country only. But what about the fact that Israel controls American foreign policy? Isn't all of our Congress bought and paid for by Israel? If that's true, that somehow Israel controls American foreign policy, then someone clearly needs to explain to me how is it that President Truman forced the Israelis to stop its advances against the Egyptian army in 1948, which actually would have destroyed the Egyptian army unilaterally. President Eisenhower forced the state of Israel to pull back from the Sinai in 1956. President Johnson refused to greenlight a preemptive strike by Israel against the Egyptians in 1967. President Nixon prevented the IDF from crushing the Egyptian Third Army. President Ford forced the Israelis to withdraw from strategic areas under the Sinai II Agreement. President Carter pressured the Israelis to fully withdraw from Sharm el-Sheikh. President Reagan applied pressure to Israelis to withdraw from Beirut. Of course, President Bush, the senior, forbade the Israelis from responding to Saddam's 1991 Scud missile attack. And a point that you failed to address is if Israel actually controls the United States government, how come that the greatest existential threat to the state of Israel of the last 20 years, the Iranian nuclear deal, JCPOA, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, of which Bibi Netanyahu, AIPAC, and almost every single Jewish American lobbied their member of Congress against, still passed. So if Israel controls America, they're doing a pretty shitty job. And that brings me to my final point. You had said the only reason America has enemies in the Middle East is because of Israel. Well, that doesn't make any sense because, as I mentioned, the first war the United States ever fought as a country was against Islamists off the coast of Libya, which was more than 140 years before the creation of the State of Israel, which really brings me to my final point. The problem we have in the United States is not something the Jews or something Israel. The problem we have in the United States is the rise of radical Islam. In the last 25 years, I am just going to name just a couple of incidents, so indulge me. Nice, France, radical Muslim terrorist. The 2017 Paris attacks, radical Muslim. The reason TSA checks your shoes in Houston airports, radical Muslim. The underwear bomber, radical Muslim. The New Orleans ISIS attack, radical Muslim. Westminster, Boston Marathon, Manchester Arena, Pan Am bombing, Fort Hood, Beltway sniper attacks, the list goes on. Bali bombing, Mortarville Rigby, USS Cole bombing, London Bridge attack, Madrid train, Charlie Hebdo, San Bernardino, U.S. Marines, Beirut bombing, Little Rock army shooting, Chattanooga military attack, Pulse nightclub massacre, New York City ISIS truck attack, Boulder, Colorado firebombing attack, D.C. shooting. Jews who wear kippahs are not going to blow you up on subway stations, but unfortunately radical Islamists will. So let's get serious. There have been more than 58,000 Islamic terrorist attacks in almost every country on planet Earth since 9/11. So while we obsess about the only democracy in the Middle East that comprises less than 9 million people, a quarter of whom are Muslim Arabs, the actual Islamists see the weakness of the West and they're going to take advantage of it. So is there foreign influence in the United States? Absolutely. We have just ganged up on the wrong country.
That is the voice of Shabbos Kestenbaum at a debate recently on the case why it's not necessarily a pro-Israel America relationship. In fact, you heard him say all foreign aid should be ended to all countries. All meaning all. This is the pro-sanity, anti-retard argument for air analysis. I guess I should have said that. This is not a pro-Israel argument. It's not a pro-Jew argument. It's a pro-reality, anti-retard argument. And here's why. Especially towards the crescendo and end there. That was just facts. Facts on facts on facts on facts. Or they're not. Or he's just making them up, pulling them out of a really dark, stinky place. So either these are facts or they're not. Either AIPAC is not the largest lobbying group in Washington, D.C., or it is, and you can present your alternative sets of facts with proof, evidence. As he said there's nobody who's going around in a kippah, one of those things that the Jewish men wear, blowing up trains, stabbing people. That's not happening. It is happening with those who are adherents to Islam. So take any of the facts that he laid before you, the evidence, and disprove them if you can. Because it is very apparent, as broad as daylight, that those who find these sets of facts very inconvenient aren't really interested in facts at all, but a narrative. That was an extraordinary clip. Again, that was Shabbos Kestenbaum at a debate where he presents the pro-reality, anti-retard position on the matter of Israel. That's going to do it for Tuesday. Hope you have a wonderful day. Back at it again tomorrow. I'm Aaron McIntyre, and this is the AM Update.